Okay, welcome everyone. I'm David Rammel, editor of Virtualization and Cloud Review, and I am pleased to be moderating our first session as well as welcoming you to our Why Zero Trust and Why Now Summit, brought to you by Commvault. Before we start today's event with these two great sessions, we do have some announcements. First, we want to let you know this event is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. You will receive an email when the replay is available, generally within the next few days. Also, each of today's two sessions will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A, so please be sure to put your questions into the Q&A area of your console as they come up so we can get them answered for you by our experts. And during today's second session, we will be giving away a $500 Target gift card. You must be present to win, so be sure to stay on for the entire event. Finally, we do have resources from our sponsor Commvault available on the console right now, so please download and check those out. It's because of Commvault underwriting this content that we can bring you the summit, so we thank them for sponsoring the summit and supporting the community, and ask you to check out those resources so we can bring you more events in the future. Also in the Resource Center is the information about our upcoming Cybersecurity and Ransomware Live event coming in November. So check that out. Now on to the first session of today's summit. The case for Zero Trust, why it is and why you need it. What it is and why you need it. This session features Greg Schultz, founder and IT analyst at Server Storage.io. Greg has worked as the customer in various IT organizations in different roles, as well as a vendor, consulting analyst, and author of several books, including Software-Defined Data Infrastructure Essentials from CRC Press. Greg brings a diverse background with real-world perspective across applications, data infrastructure, hardware, software, and cloud. He's a Microsoft MVP Cloud Data Center Management and previous 10-time VMware V expert. Greg, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you, David. And hello and welcome, everyone, to today's discussion, the case for Zero Trust. What and why, in particular now? A lot going on. I am Greg Schultz, as David mentioned, and let's get started and work our way through this discussion. And as a reminder, as Dave mentioned, we are going to be doing some Q&A, so a reminder to go ahead and submit your questions, and we'll get to those as we go and work our way through this today. And also from a logistics standpoint, this is being recorded. There'll be more follow-up sessions as part of the summit. But let's get going with this. And this whole concept around zero trust, the case for zero trust. What is it and why you need it, or what we're going to cover here in the next 50, 55 minutes or so. And one of the things that comes to mind is that up to now, recently, we get under this mindset of trust but verify. In other words, trust that things are working, trust that your security is working, trust that your data protection, your backups are working, trust that your archives are working, trust that your VPNs, your firewalls, all these different resources are working, verify them. And that has worked up to now. You can argue whether it's worked well or it hasn't, but it has worked, and it's been the mantra for quite a while. But we're in a new era, and that's why we're now talking about zero trust. In other words, don't trust anything, don't trust anyone, but yet be able to identify, verify, and then authenticate so that people can get in and do their work. And we're going to be talking about the networks, about security, apps, a lot of different aspects to this. And timing, we're also going to talk about why now. But first, let's just get into it with some of the basics here. In other words, what is zero trust? Or I'm going to use, sometimes I'll just say ZT, or ZTA, or ZTN, or ZTNA. You'll have all these ZT buzz acronyms. Well, here's the thing. As we look at this image here, as we look at this diagram, what we're seeing is more or less the traditional approach, which is that we've got mobile workforce, we've got the edge, the branch, main offices, work from home, but very much a perimeter-based inset paradigm, if you would. We've got clouds, we've got multi-clouds, we've got hybrid clouds, we've got all these different aspects, and the approach has been protect at the perimeter, i.e. firewalls, using virtual private networks, VPNs, tunnel in so that you've got access while you're mobile, while you're maybe in a different geography, maybe even out of the country, where you might be blocked from using certain services, even certain website services. You're traveling abroad and maybe you're somewhere that doesn't allow access to Netflix or something like that. So using that VPN tunnel to give you access where then you can use wherever you're tunneling into to get your outside access. And as I mentioned, that has worked. There are different approaches, different variations to that. But one of the challenges, and we'll look some more at some of these different challenges as we go through here, is that it's a perimeter-based mindset. In other words, think in terms of the cloud, that the moat was designed as that ring around the castle and that it was very hard to get across that moat. And then it's very difficult to get into the castle, get through the main gate. But once you're in, you're pretty much in. Maybe you got to get by a guard here or there, something like that. However, now with the hybrid environment, the hybrid workforce, the hybrid locations, on-prem, cloud, edge, hybrid multi-cloud, once you're in, you still need to have those different rings, those different layers of protection that are in there. So the simple gain access, once you're in the perimeter, you've got access, other than maybe some security authentication to get onto a particular server. That's where some of the challenges have become and are occurring because these environments are getting bigger and more sprawled. It's not just more that they're big, but that they're sprawled out. And the workforce, the number of devices, where those users are, those two are sprawling. And it's not just the app. It's getting at things like the different data, whether it's online data, backups, archives, whether it's getting at log files, dumps, traces, telemetry information. Those all are becoming factors now that have to be addressed, whether it's a bare metal machine, whether it's a virtual machine, a cloud machine, containers, serverless, PaaS, SaaS, buzzword bingo, a lot of different aspects to this. So this just sets the big picture, the big stage for why we're having this conversation around zero trust. And as we move on with this, there's more. There's more to the story. And getting into the more of the story is, okay, so what is zero trust? Well, there's a couple different aspects. One is trust no one or nothing without verification of who they say they are, okay? It doesn't mean that you're dealing with non-trustworthy people, non-trustworthy workforce. To me, that's kind of a misnomer, but you need to have the systems, the mechanisms that are validating who is somebody. Are they who they say they are? Are they authentic? And what is their authentication? What roles are they allowed to have access to? What rights are they able to have? And that could be something like you've got a trusted employee, a very, very trusted employee who has certain rights, and that their normal access patterns are maybe, say, 8 to 5 Central Time. Okay. Well, all of a sudden at 5:30, and that they normal log in, say, from somewhere in the Midwest. Okay. Well, all of a sudden at 5:30 Central Time, they log in from Tokyo, Japan. Well, wait a minute. That's kind of an interesting one. Maybe they VP'd in somewhere over into Japan, and that seems a little questionable. Okay. So that's part of this whole verification, validation, where it used to be trust yet verify. Now it's flipping that around, which is verify, validate before you trust. And then as part of that trust, it's only giving out what's needed. Back in the days of, here, I need root, or I need default sysadmin priv. No, you only need now what is it that you need to get your job done. Okay, so back to zero trust. It can mean different things for various audiences. There is a zero trust architecture or access, kind of a broad paradigm architecture mindset. For the networking folks, there's the zero trust network access, the zero trust network architecture. You see a lot of that in a lot of these different thinkings. It is an architecture, it is a paradigm, it is a process, but it's also technology. Let's make no mistakes about it. There is technology in use. And there's a lot of technology out there that can be used as a part of implementing a zero trust environment without maybe even having the zero trust logo on it. Likewise, there's a lot of technologies, tools, services that have pulled off one buzzword logo and put on zero trust. So as you start to do your research and dig in further, that's one of the things to be aware of is something or somebody just simply waving their zero trust flag so they get noticed. Okay, there is part of zero trust security. There's also segmentation, micro-segmentation of your networks, but also of your apps, of your environment. In other words, modern versions, variants of rings and layers of defense. Okay, so back to what zero trust means. Real simply, controlling the access based on who, i.e. the user, whether that be your workforce, a partner, a client, a customer, and what device, i.e. a physical device, a laptop, a tablet, a phone, an IoT type device, and the app is authorized to access resources. It's real simple there. Who or what is authorized to access some resource, which might be another device, it might be a service, it might be an app, it might be a function. So who is authorized to access and across your networks, whether it be on-prem, at the edge, the core cloud, along with the appropriate identify that verification and trust. In other words, who is who they say they are, and are they authorized to be able to do something? So it's really that instead of trust yet verify, it's verify then trust. But it's also protecting those credentials, protecting those validation, protecting the identity and access management, the credentials, the secrets, all those things, and leveraging that role-based identity access management. All right, let's move on. Okay, busy thing going on here, and what we're going to do is we're going to break this down a bit as we work our way through this discussion. What this is showing, look at the reds, and the reds are threat areas. Those are locations for attacks, whether they be bad actors or accidental or intentional. And this is by no ways an exhaustive, complete list. This is just to give you a sampling of the different areas that we need to focus on and think about and be aware of and think outside the box, think outside the environment a bit. And because the attackers are looking to exploit in new and different ways and leverage new technology to do so. So certainly, attacking the mobile, the work from home, attacking the users, i.e. with traditional phishing, but also with, we've seen an example of that recently with the Las Vegas attacks. There is protecting the endpoint. So wherever those little red asterisks are, those are focus areas, attacking IoT devices, attacking client, partner, customer-facing devices, as well as the users to gain access, whether that's at a software as a service like your Slack, your M365, your Salesforce, or whether it's in a cloud-based service that's yours or combined with something else, whether it's attacking the apps, the database, the repositories, the path layer, the underlying containers, the underlying virtual machines, the physical machines, attacking your data protection, attacking your backups. You think you're protected, you know you've got protection, you know it's validated, you know it works, but have they been infiltrated? Has somebody been able to gain access such that when you need to go to recover, you get that message, sorry, you've been hacked, okay? Not a good scenario. So there's a lot of these different access, and one of the other attack surfaces or vectors or places that can be attacked from on-prem to cloud. We've seen where clouds can be hacked, and particularly when you're in that hybrid, but also on-prem. You can be completely secured in cloud or on-prem, and something can happen. And the commonality is, yeah, there's technology. There's how that's being used, the processes, the policies, the techniques. But also, we can't forget that this is part technology, but it's also people. And that's where we're seeing a lot of these attacks are facilitated, is with that social engineering, where somebody gains some access from a user that then they're able to gain access into the IT or engineering department, IT engineering, to gain further access to, for example, logs or memory dumps, telemetry data, where they're able to go fishing for certificates and keys. So the whole point on this is to show you that it's a complicated, it's a dangerous world, that there's a lot of different threat risks. Those green plus signs are where they can be protected, among others. And again, this is just a representative sample. We'll dig more into that. All right. So as we go further into this, further into our discussion, there's still a couple more things here, which is, we touched on this. Really, it comes down to zero trust, whether it's a technology, whether it's a network, an architecture, a paradigm mindset. It's rings and layers of defense with different types of segmentation. Network microsegmentation with containerized, virtualized. There's different aspects to it. It's a finer granularity access controls, not just accessing through the perimeter, but inside the walls, whether it be physical or virtual. And it's only granting, as I mentioned earlier, enough applicable authorizations to do what is needed to be done. Sure, somebody will say, well, geez, I'm going to throw a temper tantrum if I don't get full admin privileges. Well, what is it that you need to do? Well, I need to have admin privileges because it's easier. Okay, well, that's where you have to assess those scenarios, and it might be easier, but what's that risk? That's a risk analysis. Okay, so it's shifting from basic default access versus elevated, and then what are the applicable trusts, and how can you verify, how can you validate that someone is who they say they are, or that something, a device, an app or service is who it says it is. It includes multi-factor authentication and two-factor authentication. And hopefully you're familiar with this, where you go to access a site or a service or a capability, and then you get the, we're going to enter the code, okay? And then on your phone, you get the text message, here's the code, or you get the phone call, here's your code, however you go about doing that, or the email. That's two-factor authentication. That's part of that environment, that app, that system, that service, validating who you are. Are you really who you say you are? Is your device really being used by you? If it is okay, then you can actually log on with your credentials. So again, it's that verifying someone or something is authorized, but it's also including that real-time monitoring, detection, notification, and automated responses. All right, so a couple more things here about zero trust in general. Zero trust should take into consideration the devices as well as the users. In particular, I touched on this, the geolocation, the access permissions, date, time, that knowledge that this particular device, this particular user is normally not accessed from this particular location at this particular time. Trust is granted once verified, and only to a least privileged access as needed or as allowed, okay? So there's also the continuous evaluation, updates to the users, device, and app authorizations, as well as revocation. Somebody leaves, their roles, their rights are revoked. So zero trust applies to an entire organization and organizations of all types and sizes, and ranging from that on-prem, edge cloud, as well as across hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, even a super cloud. from applications to SaaS services as well as data, the networks, the endpoint, mobile and local access, again, the users, as well as that managing the users, devices, the identity, the authentication. All right, that was quite a bit about what is zero trust, okay? Hopefully that gives you a bit of understanding about the zero trust, what it is, but we're going to go more onto it. And let's quickly look at what is that role? What is that role of zero trust? Well, it's ensuring that everything is not the same. Everything and everyone is a perceived threat. Okay, so we have to take that basic assumption that Greg is. We know who Greg is, so Greg has these authorizations. He's got these roles and rights. We just need to verify that it really is Greg, and that really is Greg accessing via his known device. So let's just have Greg authenticate. Yeah, he might think it's cumbersome, but he authenticates, and good. Everything is good. He's validated. All right, now get to work and get your work done. Okay, so it's about enabling that security and access control across locations and within locations, securing your data infrastructure. And keep in mind, the data infrastructure is what exists inside of physical facilities. In other words, it's the hardware, the software, the networks, the people, processes, technology, tools, along with the apps that provide that information services, regardless of if they're in an on-prem, at the edge, or in a cloud, a colo, whatever. But it's that data infrastructure. There's physically protecting physical access, okay? But then there's this protecting the logical access, i.e. that data infrastructure and all of its resources and all the logical services that it provides. It's evolving from that traditional and legacy network and application security model of once inside, you're trusted, secured. You still may need permissions, authorization to access certain sources, but there's that implicit trust and access granted, and with the ability to roam around. You may not be able to go browsing and think of it as getting into that building, and now you can roam around, but doors to rooms might be locked, closets might be locked. You still need those keys to get in. Okay, so it's evolved from that to a trust only when verified and only when authorized and when already inside that building. In other words, you've been able to get inside the building, you've been able to walk up and down aisles, you get to a locked door, you've got the key because you've now been authenticated that you can go into that room, but can you do certain things in that room that require additional authentication, additional rights, even if you are who you say you are? But it's also supporting that mobile, that remote, that work from home distributed workforce, along with the apps across the cloud back to on-prem. And it's evolving from the traditional VPNs and DMZs, basic username, password, access control, to more advanced, but yet also simple technologies that may not be password, but might be a passcode. It might be a biometric login where instead of typing in your username password, you put a thumbprint on a device and you're allowed access. Okay, so why now? We've talked about the what is the zero trust. Why now? Well, real simply is that it's a dangerous world out there. There's a lot going on. And can your organization afford to be on the headline news or even on the second or third page is not good. And there's a lot going on, as I mentioned, and everything is a perceived threat risk. Trust no one or nothing, always verify. Don't be scared, be prepared. And part of that being prepared is that being aware of what the threats are. What is happening? Yeah, it's easy to say it's a dangerous world out there, but why is it dangerous? Well, real simple is, if you haven't heard, some of the big hotels in Las Vegas were recently attacked, Caesars, MGM, and they were attacked to different degrees. One of them paid a ransom, other had to go through a lot of different authentication. And reading through the post-mortems, is very, very interesting and very, very revealing how the attackers got in. And one of their primary tools, sure, it's using AI and AI-enabled technology, but it's also using social engineering, using things like phishing, using things like voice phishing, reaching out to people that are part of that infrastructure, either in-house or service providers, to gain access. There was a recent Microsoft incident where it was revealed that the attackers had gotten in and that they had been dormant for a long period of time. Same thing with the Las Vegas attacks, that when the attacks occur, the attackers may be lying dormant, just collecting and learning and seeing what's on until it's time for them to reveal themselves. And in the case of the Microsoft, there was a compromise where certificates or security credentials were compromised because somebody, rather than attacking the apps or some of the software, they found a way to gain access to dumps. And going back and looking through dumps and traces, being able to extract enough information to be able to get the right information, to be able to put together how to do the next phase of the attacks to gain more credentials. So part of this is don't be scared, be prepared, know the threats. On that previous slide back, we saw those little red asterisks. There's a lot more of them. But then there's the how do you go defending them. Those are the green ones, and there's a lot more. But it's being able to detect, defend, deflect, diagnose in real time and verify different aspects to it. Part of the solution is technology. Part of the solution is education training for your users, your staff, among others. But here's the other thing, is that when attacked, it could be a complete loss of access, loss of the apps or data. It could be a partial loss, destruction, damage, corruption, or it could be a simple denial of service attack to disrupt an organization. It could be that the apps are compromised, data is theft or is exposed. So it's know the threat risks, their impacts, detect, diagnose, defend, leverage automation, but there also is the non-automation sorts of things where you need the people to get in there and look at something new and determine, yeah, this is a new threat. We need to add this to the automation to start detecting. We need to go and look at this. Having your data protection, having your backups, which includes your configuration, your firewalls, your configurations for your access management servers, having those protected, but also protecting the protection mechanism such that they can't be compromised. All right, so again, why now? What are the challenges? There's also that dependency on the apps, the services, and data being available when needed. We've got this dependency that, the data is there, that it's safe, it's secure, but we've also seen the growth in applications, new applications existing, dead data spread around, and also at an all-time high in mobile workforce and work from home. There's also the increased threat risk from accidental to intentional attacks from the different bad actors. As I mentioned, theft of data, theft of keys, theft of access signatures, or damaging disruption. There's the ransomware, the malware, or in schools, zip bombs. If you're not familiar with that, you might want to look to see figure out what a zip bomb is, but it's basically something that goes off and disrupts schools. So guess what? Kids get a school from home day, okay? So it's not the traditional attacks on the schools, but there's all these different aspects to it. But it could also be stealing resources. All of a sudden, your system is running slow. It's not because somebody is collecting your data. It's because they're stealing your network bandwidth. They have found a way to run maybe a Bitcoin farm on your systems. And they're just consuming your bandwidth. They're consuming your CPU. They're taking away from your productivity. And these threats are occurring for different reasons: financial gain, activist causes, political, industrial espionage, and some are just malicious for causing chaos. So what are some of the ones that have been in the news lately? And there's an old expression, whether it be in security backup data protection, about the industry, the vendors, the service providers, of never let a good or bad incident go to waste. So in other words, notice how whenever it's hurricane season or floods or a data breach, all of a sudden everybody jumps up and down and starts making noise. That's what they're doing. They're just leveraging that opportunity to remind you that you should be doing something. Doesn't mention, there was a recent Las Vegas hotel, Caesars MGM. Google what happened. It's fascinating reading. I would almost say if you're involved in this space, if you're interested, it's required reading. Learn what they did wrong, and you can sit there and say, well, geez, they should have done this, that. Learn from it so that you learn from those mistakes. There was the Azure attacks. There was the Colonial Pipeline. There have been AWS incidents. Going back in time a few years, there was the RSA keys, that were attacked. Minneapolis Public Schools in Minneapolis, Minnesota were attacked last year. The University of Minnesota, along with a whole bunch of other schools, had a massive data breach several years ago that now information is coming out. There was a California Department of Finance and many, many more. You could do a whole webinar just on somebody was attacked, here's what happened and why. But just go out there, do a little Googling, read up on some of these, and you don't want your name on that news as having been attacked. Okay. We've also running into challenges where traditional approaches, such as VPN, it's not enough to just simply secure the perimeter. We need to control who and what can gain that access. Also, the scalability from the on-prem cloud, multi-cloud of the apps, leveraging third-party and SaaS services. There's also the potential performance issues and impact of using things like a VPN. Poor visibility into who or what is actually using that IP address that is being used. There's also the potential for false positives, false access of issues due to somebody good who can be validated, but is using a bad IP address that's known on a known bad list. So there are the different complexities that continue to scale. But here's the thing. The attackers and bad actors, they are getting more sophisticated, including using AI. They're using AI for the attacks, but they're also using it to refining their conversations and communications. Don't trust the fact that you're just looking for bad spelling, bad grammar to determine whether an email or a text is a phishing attack. No, they're figuring out how to correct that. The bad actors, are figuring out that if they can do spell check, and for a long time I've said is that as long as attackers don't know how to use spell check, grammar checks, there's a way you can kind of protect. Those days are gone. They're gone. It's a dangerous world. Threat risks are everywhere. Don't be scared. Be prepared. So, again, here are some of those different points. And this is just a sampling. We could put this up on a wall size and add even more detail, more granularity. And granularity is one of the issues, but it's also one of the protection needs. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground here in the last half hour or so. Let's use the remaining time to start to go into how do we establish and how do we implement a zero trust strategy and plan. So with that in mind, let's get to it. You know what? These next two slides, they're busy. What I did was I put 4 slides and collapsed them down to 2. So anyway, you can go through these. Again, this is being recorded, so you can go back and rewatch this. But it's putting the puzzle pieces together. Zero trust, it's a journey. It can be applied. Again, there's the technology, the tools. It's a paradigm. It's an architecture. It's a process. It's a set of policies, how you're going to do it. Learn, research, talk with others, including vendors and service providers. Look at their templates. Look at their sample architecture. Some have proof of concept areas where you can experiment, where you can go into an Azure or an AWS or a Google and set up an environment and do some testing, some training, some learning. But keep in mind, the best ZT strategy and plan is the one that fits your environment, your business needs, requirements. Understanding what are your concerns and challenges? What is your desired outcome? What do you want your environment to do and enable? Is the objective to go zero trust, or is it the objective, that end state, to have an entity, an organization, your data infrastructure, your information services that are zero trust enabled? Okay, so what is it? Is it to focus on the new approach, the trend, or that outcome? What is your timeline? What is your business and other mandates or regulations? Get others involved. Create a cross-functional team with management support, buy-in, and endorsement. Revisit and assess where and how encryption is being used today for access, as well as data movement, as well as data at rest. Review and discover. Assess your environment, the threat risk, the impacts, the users, the apps, the data. How are you doing identity and access management control today? Are you doing it at the edge? Are you doing it on-prem, at the cloud? Are you simply using VPN? And if you are, how are you using it? Are you also using Secure Access Services Edge, or SaaS, or software-defined WAN? Moving on. What policies, processes, procedures, controls are needed along with management approval? Can you create that sandbox, that test and lab environment, or proof of concepts, as well as for doing that initial and recurring testing? How will you address education and training for your workforce, whether it be your end users or your IT staff, whether it be your sysadmins, your DBAs, your developers, your DevOps, whoever they happen to be, your network, your security? How are you handling training for your users, your staff, your clients, and your partners? Review and update your firewalls, your endpoint protection technology, the rules and policies, and protect your IAM, your identity access management. Protect the endpoint, protect the services along with the certificates, the signatures and credentials. You know what? At some point here, you should be saying, geez, this sounds like a lot of common sense. It is. It is. But you've got to do it. It's just going through that. Leveraging the automation for things that are reoccurring, for that low-hanging fruit, to free up resources to go and look at new things, new threats, emerging things. But leverage that automation and that real-time visibility as part of detection, verification, identity, access management, but having that telemetry and making sure that your logs, your reports, your dumps, your traces are all secure, that they're all protected, and that however they are protected, that mechanism as well is protection. In other words, protect and secure your logs, your backup data, and make sure that your backups are actually working, and not just that they completed, that you're able to not only restore the data, but the apps can actually use them. It's one thing to say, hey, congratulations, our backups are the best. They get done every night. There's no error. There's no problem. We did a test restore. Everything was great. Somebody goes, they restore a file, and it's locked. Somebody goes and restores a database, and it's corrupted. It's damaged. It's been infected. So as part of that testing, involve the full stack, if you would. Verify. Trust that it's working, but verify it. And again, there's that ongoing review and assessment, incident analysis, post-mortems, do pen testing. So again, reinforce your technology, the hardware, software, network is only as good as how you define, use it. All right, so let's get into some best practices real quick, and then we're going to move into some Q&A here. So what are some best practices and tips? Real simply, secure your technology, your tools, your systems, your apps, your devices, and authenticate those who are going to be using them. Validate, verify that whoever it is who they say it is. Whatever the device is or the app is who it says it is. Protecting the protection tools, protecting the security environment, protecting the credentials, protecting the logs, the traces. having those keys, the certificate, the credentials, making sure that you've got HTTPS and SSL, multi-factor authentication, logs, dumps, traces, all enabled, protected. Educate your users, your workers, your partners. Watch out about social engineering schemes, whether it's phishing, vishing, voice phishing, via text messages, SMS, direct messages on social media. The attackers are getting creative. They are getting more advanced. Instead of trust and verify, verify then trust. And again, I'm going to emphasize, protect your data protection. In other words, if all else fails and you have to restore, you have to rebuild, the worst thing you want, probably as bad as being attacked, is realizing that, yeah, the stuff is there, but we can't access it. It's been locked on us. Or it's there, we can get to it, it's been corrupted. Okay, so start and continue discussions within your organizations along with your various partners. Again, I'm just going to put this up here as we start to wrap up. Okay, the red are the risks, along with a lot of others. The green, along with many, many other greens that can be on here, is what you can do, how you can go about securing your environment. All right, wrapping up for now, we're going to move into some Q&A. Everything and everyone is a threat until you can verify, validate who it is, what it is, and are they who they say they are. Understand the risk, the attack surfaces and their impact. How scalable is your current protection? Can it scale? What are your current issues? What is your desired end state? Is it simply to say, we are zero trust enabled? Good for you. Or that we have a robust, scalable, flexible, resilient environment that includes zero trust and other things. That's even better, in my opinion. Okay? So work with your partners, the vendors, the service providers. Here's some resources where you can learn more, including my books, or some of my books. Software-defined data infrastructure essentials, cloud and virtual data storage networking, data infrastructure management, my website, my book site, my Twitter, my email. But with that, hey, Dave, do we have time for some questions?
We certainly do. And I'd like to remind the audience that we can take questions up until about 5 minutes or so to the top of the hour in order to transition to the next session. So please send them on in now. And let's get right to those questions. There's a bunch of them in the console. There's a couple that deal with the size of the organization to use Zero Trust. For instance, one question is asked, is it only for large businesses? And Bob in the audience says, can we manage ZTNA authentication with a small, large office, facility, and or campus?
Okay, so we're going to split this into two answers because there's a couple of different pieces there. But let's approach it this way. Okay, first off, does this apply to small environments, small offices? The answer is yes. The other part to it, so that's that whole, who does it apply to, what size, what type? The answer is yes. Okay. Then the other part of it is the how and with the what. Okay, now this is where we shift from, the first part is think of it as a architecture, a paradigm that you're operating in, okay? So even if you're a one-person entity, you could still be doing zero trust using things like two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, best practices. You're basically just scaling things down, but you're using different tools and technologies under that paradigm approach, okay? So then the other side is that for a larger organization, it could scale up, where then you start to get into the different tools, the different technologies, and how they are going to be used. How can you use your existing technology? What new tools can you use? How's that going to work from small office, branch office, the edge, to the core, to the cloud? So we have to think of that in two different ways. There's the process, the paradigm, the architecture view, and then how you're going to scale that and with what.
Okay. There's a question in the audience that concerns zero knowledge. Are you familiar with that, Greg?
Zero knowledge, It means you don't know about something.
Okay, it's a
Now,
cryptography.
is there such a new buzz term? I'm sure by the time we answer this question, somebody's going to have another one. So there's a lot of things playing off this whole zero trust, zero knowledge, zero experience. But the ones that I'm aware of, the context is, zero knowledge means there is no knowledge of something.
Okay, yeah, it's actually a different thing, but we'll skip that for now. Here's a question. What are the cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google doing about zero trust?
Yeah, a couple different aspects there. Again, we'll split this into two-part answers. One is that to access your resources, to access an AWS and Azure or other services, you have to authenticate. And it's not just a simple username password where you'll get the request, okay, we don't recognize your device. We need for you to validate. We're sending you a code. You want to use Authenticator. You want us to text you. Where you do that multi-factor authentication, so they verify who you are is who you say you are, and what you are using is what they are authenticating. Likewise, authenticating based on your IP and other known information. The other aspect to that is the resources that they have available. All of them have knowledge centers. So you can go from zero knowledge to some knowledge to lots of knowledge, lots of experiences relatively quickly. And you can find those simply, Google, Azure, Zero Trust, and you'll get all kinds of info from how they do it, they being Microsoft, to how it's implemented, where it's implemented, to templates, to learning guides, and so forth.
Okay, great. I'd like to remind the audience to please send in any questions you have, because Greg lives and breathes this stuff. So this is a great opportunity for someone to get some expert one-on-one discourse. And speaking of which, Lynn in the audience asks, are there specific industries or sectors where zero trust is particularly relevant?
Yeah, and I'm going to give, again, two-part answer is one, all industries are susceptible, okay? We used to think that it was only certain high profile, but we're seeing an increase in attack on schools, in education institutions, where in the past it was thought, well, what are they going to gain? Well, they're going to gain personal information about students, their parents, maybe even credit card information that have some downstream attributes to it. So to answer the other question, so I say every industry is potentially at risk, but what it really comes down to is what's the profile of your organization? Who's going to want to attack it? Are you a target for geo or political or activist reasons? Are you a target for financial reasons? Or are you a target just simply that somebody can say, look what we did, you better be prepared, we're coming after somebody new. So for specific industries, those that have sensitivity, those that have a lot of dependencies upon them that can cause economic or other infrastructure, other impacts to people, whether they're going to vacation to Vegas or an oil pipeline. It really comes down to what's your visibility and your exposure risk. Okay.
There's a question right up your alley, Greg, as you wrote a book on software-defined networking. The question, what role does SD-WAN, software-defined wide area networking, and micro-segmentation play in a zero-trust environment?
Yeah, that's a good question, is that they should be a part of it. They can be part of it. They're one of the tools in the toolbox. Should that be your single focus, that you have to have microsegmentation, that you have to have SD-WAN? It's part of the toolbox that you use the right tool at the task at hand. if you hear or are told that you have to have software-defined WAN or that you have to have microsegmentation and that Zero Trust can only be if and only if it has those, you're probably getting a vendor pitch, okay? There can be relevance to that, but there's more to the story. They can be part of the solution. Think about how they're going to be used. What is it that they're going to be used for? Are you simply using something new to do something old, or are you going to use those new technology capabilities in a new way?
Okay. Let's move on to the requisite AI question. Everybody wants to know about AI. How does AI help solve security and access control, including detect and prevent attacks?
Yeah, so if we were to take AI off the question for a moment and substitute in automation, okay? How does automation and automated knowledge and knowledge bases and known threat risks, however you want to put that, those are all entities that we have today. They may not be advertised or promoted or talked about as AI. On the flip side, some may be skipping and jumping right to AI as opposed to saying to automated tools, because there's a lot of different aspects to AI. But where they have a play is, one, both in the attack, but also in the defense. Excuse me, also in the detection, is leveraging automation. Also, if you want to call it AI, and we're not going to get into what is AI and what isn't it. But if you leverage tools to automatically detect and determine that this is a known threat, and here's how you're going to act upon it, that this looks to be a new threat, so let's start logging information, let's start learning about it, let's let somebody know so that some deeper analysis can go into play, and then based on what we learn, let's plug that back into our knowledge base, into our learning algorithms, into our learning or language modules as a part of that. So that's part of the defending, the detecting, the remediation. And on the attack surfaces, it could be leveraging AI bots to bombard, to detect, to try to do penetration, to see what they can do, see what they can learn, to do phishing. But there's also leveraging AI technology for content to clean things up so they look more authentic, so they look more real, that to get by that old classic, it's misspelled, it must be a phishing scheme, to get by that. And even to refine their scripts when they're calling and doing a voice phishing scheme. So it can play in a couple different areas.
Okay. That's just my own follow-up related question. Do you use AI a lot in your work now?
Do I use it or reference it? I use automation. And there's some automation that some might say, well, that's AI. There's some other things that some might say AI that others are going to say, well, that's automation.
Okay.
But, I guess to get specific, did I use AI-enabled technologies in writing my books? Not for content creation, not for content generation, but for production, for checking, for refining, just like you would a spell check.
Okay. Mike in the audience says, so ZTNA is more of a philosophy that needs to be defined and then figure out how to implement?
It can be a philosophy and architecture, but it can also be a technology product. So if you go out and if you were to go out and look at ZTNA, and it's going to be networking vendor, networking service providers, they're going to be talking more about zero trust network architecture, zero trust network access. That's the focus that they're coming from. That's the focus area that they want to discuss about. So it can be both. It can be that architecture philosophy paradigm, but it can also be technology and services related.
Okay, let's try to squeeze in a couple more questions. Bob from the audience asks you to get out your crystal ball, Greg. He says, as ZTNA evolves, what is your prophecy of where we'll be in 5 years?
In 5 years, we will probably be on the verge of talking about the future technology that will replace ZT. That will be probably another 5, 10 plus years down the road, because it was around 10, 15 plus years ago that the ZT discussions really got started. It takes that long. But the other side to it is that we'll see more organizations now operating with zero trust philosophies, zero trust processes, paradigms, technology, tools, management processes, and others following suit.
Okay. Here's a question you could probably do a whole session on itself.
Absolutely.
How do you do zero trust? How do you do zero trust in a heterogeneous environment, dealing with the multi-clouds, on-premises, vendors, and all that stuff?
Carefully, very carefully. This is where you have to really think it through. I mean, you got to think it through, David, is that that's where that understanding the environment, what's its scale, that decomposition, how do you protect the different capabilities. Then it's looking at tools and technology, management tools, technologies, and services that have the plugins, the integrations that can plug into a VMware, that can plug into a Win Server, Hyper-V, Azure HCI, Azure Stack, into your VMwares, your different things like that, or plug into your different databases, plug in to your different network capabilities for doing things like identity access management, client identity access management, cloud. The different vendors, the cloud vendors have that capability. Some of the service providers have that. There's a lot of different ones that are out there that have that capability. Some specialize and be able to work in that third-party type of environment, that heterogeneous environment.
All right, let's quickly move to the next question. What are considerations for data protection, data persistence, including backup/restore?
Key thing is, one, make sure that you have that data protection capability, whether it's traditional backups, whether it's snapshots that then get replicated or replications with snapshots, whether it's consistency point, checkpoints, whatever it happens to be, that one, make sure that you are protecting on different intervals and that you are having multiple copies of those intervals or versions, and that you can go back to different points in time to those different versions, and that you've got multiple copies of them, and that some of them are on site, some of them are off site and or offline, but that they themselves are protected, not just encrypted, but that access management to those protection copies, to the catalogs, to the management tools, whether they're on-prem, at the edge, or at the cloud, is also secure, is also verified, that you apply zero trust, not just to access into your infrastructure, but also think of that sub-ring, that additional ring around those capabilities, and verify that you can actually restore from a backup, and that what you restore can actually be used by the database, used by a developer, used by an application, that it's not just simply, yep, we got it back from whatever the medium is, it worked. No, do that full stack, that end-to-end testing and verification.
Okay, last question. Who should be part of a zero trust team?
It's cross-functional. Look across your organization. It should be the security, the networking, sysadmins, storage specialists, certainly users, developers, and management. It's a cross-functional team because it's a cross-functional issue and topic.
Okay, great. It looks like that's all the questions we have time for. So thanks again, Greg, for an excellent presentation and answering all of those questions.
No worries. Thanks, David. We could go on and on, but we got to wrap up.